Hi, I'm John, and I'm making a commander set for each of the five 2016 precons. My plan is to, without having any of the precons, completely rebuild them with modern cards and standard all the cards that have come out since then in ways that better activate and use their abilities and their specific color combinations while still being balanced with the other four so that theoretically all five could be played together, a star format where you are attacking the two people across from you and allies with two people next to you. The five commanders are Kenny and Tiro, Kenai, Quinoa, and Tiro of Miletus. Every color except black. At the end of your end step, draw a card. Then each player, starting with you, may place a land card from their hand into the battlefield. Each opponent who doesn't gets to draw a card. That is my dog walking away slowly. Giddy Boy, Yidris, the Maelstrom Wanderer. All the colors except black. When he does combat damage, all spells you cast from your hand gain Cascade until the end of the turn. Oh, so much fun. Storm out the wazoo. I play tested probably 10 different decks of different types for each of these commanders on tappedout.net. Great community full of amazing creative people. And every single Yidris deck tends to not do anything and then just boom, wins the game. So I guess that'd be called combo, right? Saskira, all the colors except blue, white, black, green, red. When she enters the battlefield, choose a player. Any creature that does combat damage to any player does the same amount of combat player damage to the player you chose. Sick. Mrs. Brea, artifact creature, white, black, blue, red. She actually uses each color in turn in her abilities. She comes into play and makes two flying thopters, blue. You can pay 2 and sacrifice 2 artifacts, black, to either burn a creature or burn a player, red, or gain 3 life, white. I think that's awesome. The only thing she doesn't do is green, which makes sense because she's an artifact. She hasn't got any time for these living big creatures. And then finally, Atraxa. No red, white, black, blue, green. Atraxa is by far the most expensive of all these commanders if you were to buy the single. She is used in a lot of Super Friends decks, and I'm not going to use her for that in this situation because it's not supposed to be super competitive. It's not supposed to be turn 4 and 5 winning. It's supposed to be a game that's balanced with these other commanders. And I think her power level, being able to proliferate at the beginning of your unstep, that's what she does. She proliferates, is capable of being a huge mismatch with the other commanders' power levels. That said, in the playtesting I've done, each one of them has won in a strategy that they use. So they all have capabilities. It's not like any of these are duds. It's just that Atraxa is going to be the trickiest to find a power level that works for her ability really well without being completely busted. So we'll see. So yeah, they're all going to try to be based and balanced in kind of the same way. For example, if I have an alt win condition, I'm going to have 1 in each of these decks based on the strategy of the deck. They'll probably each have a couple planeswalkers in them, but she's not going to be all planeswalkers and planeswalker tribal and all that stuff. It's just not going to happen. And you might be thinking, well, how do you know that? What are you going to do for each of these decks? I actually have no idea what I'm going to do for these decks. I have ideas about concepts and themes based on what I've seen from playtesting. I know he wants to do like a storm type thing. Brea wants to do like artifacts or burn or sacrifice tribal aristocrats. Great for Miss Brea. Saskira wants, of course, to do combat damage, but not necessarily her. But Yidris does want to do combat damage, specifically him. So he could also do Voltron, and she could just do mad aggro, because unlike a lot of aggro decks which die at more than 1 versus 1, she can do combat damage to every player, or at least 2 players each turn. Crazy. Whoever the weakest person on the board is, cast her, choose the strongest player, attack the weakest. The strongest player loses life too. Stupid good. And these guys, nobody likes them because all they do is let everyone else ramp and draw their cards. So it's going to be interesting to find, a deck that works with them but also works with everyone else. They want to do Pillow Fort or Land Matters, but they do have every color except black, so they have a lot of capabilities. So how am I going to figure out what am I going to do? Well, against the advice and counsel of my very well-esteemed friends who have asked about this, I decided to use, it's not a big deal, I decided to use the guilds from Ravnica as a baseline for each of the commanders. There's 10 guilds, each of 2 color pairings. And altogether, they could make up 2 guilds for each of these commanders to make up all 10 guilds. They could all be distributed 2 for each one of these commanders, if that makes any sense. Doing that would give us a color balance for all of these commanders that reflects all the basic synergies of the guilds. Now, I know that the guilds have their own weaknesses and strengths and failings design-wise. Certain ones only have one basic mechanic or one style of play, and that's all they do. But I actually like that idea because it kind of gives us guides on what the decks will be for the commanders. For example, the easiest one to quantify, Simic. Every set of Ravnica, and we now have War of the Spark out to finish the 3rd round of Ravnica sets. Simic's ability has been based on +1/+1 counters, whether it involves, drafting, which lets you move a counter from your creatures to another creature into the battlefield, or adapting, which lets you put counters on your creature, or evolving, which lets it gain counters when bigger creatures enter the battlefield. It's all +1/+1 counters. And when I look at this, Saskira can't do it. Brea can't do it because they don't have blue or green, so they can't be Simic. Kenoi and Tiro, maybe, but draw a card, play extra lands, I'm not seeing a strong connection to them. Yidris, maybe, but he's going to be casting, theoretically, casting cards from your hand is the focus for him, so it's not really going to be about creatures as much as casting cards, whatever the deck may be. It's probably going to be something related to Storm. But Atraxa, Proliferate, that's +1/+1 counters can be proliferated. So anything that can make, create, or gain +1/+1 counters makes sense for Atraxa. So obviously there's 10 guilds. They're not all going to match up. I'm going to start with the easy ones, and then we'll start looking at the mechanics for the not as easy choices to really nail down what each of the deck types are going to be. Each commander will have 2, and the combined fusions of those 2 guilds into like a 3-color guild will let us know what we're going to do for their deck. That does not mean the deck is going to be based on Ravnica or necessarily the mechanics that those specific Ravnica sets have for those guilds, but at least we'll say Atraxa is going to be using +1/+1 counters. Knowing that, it kind of leans towards creatures, maybe creatures that boost each other, creatures that get benefits from +1/+1 counters. That doesn't mean that nobody else is going to be using those. But if Simic stays with Atraxa, it's more likely. And let's just say another thing, just Azorius. For whatever reason, if Azorius winds up with Atraxa, then Atraxa's color combo is white-blue and blue-green. The overlying color, the strongest, the one that's in both guilds, is blue. So this is going to be my primarily blue-based themed deck. And I guess that seems kind of convoluted. But I've done this by paper randomly, by randomly assigning guilds that could be assigned to these commanders without any preference to what the guilds actually do, just purely based on colors. And whenever they're all legally assigned, you don't ever wind up with 4 colors represented by the guilds that are assigned to them. You always wind up with an overlap of 1 color and 2 weaker colors. If this was Atraxa with Simic and Azorius, blue being the strongest color and then white and green would be the weaker colors, we wouldn't see